Okay, this is a video about setting up right from scratch, right from when you download it, setting up the AutoSteer. I'm just narrating. So first thing you do, of course, is you have to shut off the simulator. So turn the simulator off, application exits, restart. This is new from the latest version. And of course, nothing happens. So then you go to ports and choose your COM port that your GPS is on. 19200, connect. And there you have your sentence coming through. Fix is from GGA. Make sure you select that. Make sure that you choose the right NMEA hertz. I'm hooked to a 10 hertz signal or GPS fix. Next thing we want to do is select your heading correction and roll source. I'm using the brick on the roof, and I'm using the MMA on the AutoSteer board. Click save. Now at this point everything's messed up, of course, so restart. It doesn't know what you want to do, so it has to figure that out at the very start. Alright, I'm using UDP, like Ethernet, for communication to the steering module. You would just be hooking up the AutoSteer port on the port setup if you use USB, or just use UDP the other way, like this way. Alright, so now you got your roll, you got your yaw, everything's happy, and so normally the counts per degree comes up in 8. I bumped this to make the video, but you can see where the mouse is, the actual is 125 degrees. Well, that's not right. So turn the wheels about 45 or 50 degrees, and then now you can just play with the counts per degree and read the actual right off the screen. And so you see around 30 is about right. I mean, you just need a rough estimate to get going. All these settings, of course, you can fine tune them, but knowing where to start and a good place to start is important. So yeah, max steer angle, turn that down so you don't, you kind of limit that initial setup angle. The gain, both 5 and 5. Minimum drive is at 10. We'll just leave that where it is. And now drive is really handy. Flip the motor up, put the AutoSteer against. Now set it to 0. So yeah, it turns slowly, but you can see that it doesn't really get there. So you start turning up the gain. I can see it starting to get closer to 0. See, it's pretty close. Now it's 0.5. We diggle it around a bit. Set it to 13, and it comes to 13. Go 13 or 14 the other way. It's not too bad. So remember, we haven't moved anywhere yet. We've already set a lot of things in AutoSteer. So just kind of play with it, see where it goes. The minimum drive, you go from 0 to 255, is the possible pulse width. There, you see it? The higher you go, that's like the minimum value that the motor can be. So it's at 52 already before you start. So the higher that amount is, the more current you're giving to the motor, to the valves to turn on. So you can see as you turn that way up, then it becomes unstable. So you kind of want it so that the motor's almost ready to turn, but it doesn't overturn or turn on its own without any signal being put into it. So now you can see 12, bang, 4, 0, hits on 0, works pretty good. So let's start moving. Now we're going to do the 0 offset. I use the IMU for this. Just watch your IMU. And if it goes up or it goes down, that means you're not driving in a straight line. So you just keep adjusting your steer angle sensor so that it drives in a straight line. Do this on flat ground, as flat as possible. And if it gets worse one way, well then just take the 0 and move it the other way. It's fairly critical setting. You can see I backed the tractor up straight and it's just kind of following its path again. in the video. So there we go. It's fairly stable. It's not really changing much one way or the other. So now we do a quick little test now that we're driving. 14 to the right, 14 to the left. So your set and actual are pretty darn close. Let's get it to 0. Double check your... So a little more oomph. It needs a little more oomph to get there. So like the drive will, it's a pretty useful feature. Okay, so that's about all you can do with the drive now. Set it up with Stan Lee first. Leave those at 1 and 1, although I like 0.8 because it kind of goes over the line a little bit and then corrects. But they're so forgiving, those two things. Now this is the steer chart. The red and the green are your set and your actual. And you see how they should follow? They should follow each other pretty close. I mean, you're not going to follow perfectly because it takes time to turn the steering wheel. But as you move it back and forth, it should follow and it shouldn't overshoot. Yeah, you see, it just gets there and then hangs out with the green one. And it's very low error. You can see its actual set point in error, the bottom numbers. So it's like 0.05 degrees. So that works pretty good. All right, so now go make an AB line. So you create a new field. Slowest typing in the world. So you can see that if you kind of follow that logical, you know, set your 0, set some normal gains, don't make it too aggressive, that sort of thing, and you kind of follow this sequence, it'll work pretty good. So now we just make a 90-degree line. Easy enough, and let's see how it works. Remember, this is our first attempt at driving an AB line. And see, look in the chart. It's following quite nicely. And we're going pretty slow. There you go. Follows the line. Just like that. If you have a stable GPS, and I mean that sure helps. This is I'm just using a basic crappy 20-year-old DGPS receiver for this. Nothing special. So side hill draft, what that does is if you're on an angle, it'll push the tractor more up the hill. Now you can see we're 21, 22, 30 centimeters off the line to the high side of the line so that the implement then, see we're at what, almost -5 degrees on a slope. So you can adjust how far up the hill you want to go. Fairly simple measurement. I don't know what I'm doing here. I think it's just following it along. You can see it tracks pretty good. Now here we watch the steering wheel now. The steering wheel starts to wiggle back and forth. I think it turned up some more. See how it's kind of jiggly? And we can turn it right down too. It's just slower to react. Sometimes it works better. If you don't want the steering wheel to turn so much, just turn that minimum drive down. So it's actually really forgiving. Counts per degree. As we start to turn that up, you can start to see what happens. It starts to wander back and forth. And we might try to make a U-turn. It's way out to lunch. Remember, our counts per degree should be 30 here. It just way overcompensates and goes all wonky doodle. So remember, the counts per degree is what the A to D number is per degree of steering wheel turn. Not the steering wheel, but the steering wheels, the ones up front. So we turn that down too slow, or if it's too low, the counts per degree, it turns way too fast, and it'll just oscillate back and forth. So the number, while it's critical, you know, you can be a couple, three, one way or the other, and you probably wouldn't even notice. Like this thing could probably be somewhere between 28, 27, and 32, 33, and it would probably still work just fine. But just to get going and start, it's pretty obvious where the right one is. Now you can see I'm cutting way inside on the U-turn. There's something I forgot to do, because remember, we're starting out as a very new machine, just using the standard default values. And if anyone can figure out what I forgot to do already, I forgot to set the pivot axle position and the wheelbase and that sort of thing. So now I'm going to do it. So my antenna is 150 centimeters ahead of the pivot axle, and my wheelbase is around 3 meters. So you can see, you can watch what happens with the effect of changing that wheelbase. The wheelbase is actually quite sensitive. If you want to turn sharper without doing anything else, just increase the wheelbase. You want to turn less sharp, you can just kind of decrease that wheelbase, and you can fudge a fair bit. Now you can see that hitch follows that line perfectly. But you can still see that we're quite a ways out. It's like 60, 70 centimeters off that line. So when we come off the line now, we're quite a ways from it. So let's just make it turn sharper. Just increase our counts per degree a little bit, and then try it again. Remember, we changed the wheelbase. The wheelbase affects the radius. So that's why now the counts per degree is a little different. Now that follows pretty good now. I don't know what I'm doing here again. So there you see in the steer chart, follows pretty good. Okay, so that's kind of in summary just how to set up the AutoSteer initially, and hopefully that helps. It starts from scratch. Remember to do all the settings, and then do the basic settings using the drive, and then go for a drive. Make sure your zero is right, then create a line, and then just kind of see how it works. So hope that helps. Okay, thanks.